Hi, everyone. My name is Myra, and I'm part of the Auggie event squad team. Auggie is the #1 platform for parents to find community, share recommendations, and learn from experts. Again, this meeting is being recorded. So again, if you want to have your video off and your mic off, that's totally fine. I will be keeping an eye on the chat. So if you do have any questions while Courtney is presenting, I'll make sure that they're relayed to her. But yeah, so we have Managing Toddler Meltdowns today with Courtney. We're very excited to have her here. And with that, I'm just going to hand it off to her and have her start.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed the Auggie app myself because I have a 4.5-year-old and a 3-month-old. So there have been resources across the board. So thank you for having me. And I'm so excited to talk about this topic. I feel like this is my most asked question in my work is how do we manage like big emotions, meltdowns? And there's a top down approach and a bottom up approach. So I'm going to be talking mostly about the bottom up approach, but obviously you have to tie in some top down just to help children understand. But the younger the children are, or the child is, you use more of a bottom up approach, and then as they get older you can start to weave in those top down approaches. So let's get started. I am going to just give you a little bit of info about myself. I am a pediatric occupational therapist. I am a mom of two. Again, I have two daughters. One is 4.5 and one is now 3 months. It says 2 months because I gave a presentation a couple weeks ago with Auggie too on a different topic. So my whole focus in my work and practice is on sensory regulation, with a little bit of sleep science too for regulation, because I work with just general regulation, and then I help parents with like bedtime and in sleeping as well. But I'm not a sleep consultant, although I've taken many courses. Um, I have written a book for bedtime, a musical bedtime book to help with regulation because music and rhythm is tied directly to how we regulate our brains and our bodies. I love to do program development and support. I'm a board member for a non-for-profit organization in Alabama for their programming for community stuff like that. So I love all that kind of stuff. And I focus a lot on like parent coaching and co-regulation and helping parents build good, calming, regulating sensory routines to help with proactive regulation of the nervous system. So that means, when it comes to meltdowns, we're not like reactively trying to solve this. We're proactively preventing like a huge escalation of emotions. And when we do get this escalation of emotions and body meltdown and brain meltdown, that we're allowing the children to work through it so that they can develop some type of resilience to stress, which is important. We don't want to shut down that because then we'll never learn how to respond to stress. So, really quick overview. Oh, my picture is not showing up. So it's so sad. It's just a picture of me and my daughter. But the agenda is meltdowns versus tantrums. We're going to talk about the difference. It's important to know the difference so that you know how to intervene. We're going to talk about what happens in the brain during a meltdown. We're going to talk about proactive regulation, so learning how to proactively have activities or certain sensory experiences throughout the day for your child so that they have more space to regulate when you have little space in your brain or flexibility in your brain and something doesn't go your way or something changes, there's a change in routine. We have a little space or a small window of regulation to adapt, modify, be, flexible. And then we're going to talk about co-regulation and then some reflection and planning for the future. And then we'll have some question and answer, although you can feel free to shoot a question into the chat and I can answer that too as we're speaking about it. So meltdowns versus tantrums, knowing the difference. So the difference between a meltdown and a tantrum, I like to say, is somewhat broadly like sensory versus behavior, because when we have a meltdown, it's actually a sensory response and a nervous system response. The child is no longer able to control their behavior, their body. You can't reason with them. You try to give them what you thought they wanted, it makes it worse. And it really just seems like there's going to be no end. And you could see it in their face. You can see that that the brain is kind of offline because like they're in like the survival mode. They're melting down. But the difference between a meltdown and a tantrum is the tantrum is more behavioral in nature. So, you can sometimes be like, they're like having big emotions. You're like, oh, did you want this? Did you want the cracker that you wanted? Or like, oh, your cracker broke. Like, here, I give you a new cracker. And they usually can come back from it. Like you can kind of test it and see, oh, like that's like their tantrum. And it's usually in response to being told like no, or they don't get their way, or they just want to do something their way. And you don't see that escalation of emotions where they're like literally inconsolable. So those are the two main differences between that. Like it's more like sensory versus behavior. So that's why when it's a meltdown, you take a sensory approach, a bottom-up approach, and when it is behavioral, you take a behavioral approach. So, a meltdown, we're going to dive into meltdown first. What's happening in the brain? So, I like to talk about two different types of the brain. So, there's like the bottom brain and then there's the top brain. Some people call like the bottom brain, like the lizard brain. So, in our upper brain, we do a lot of more advanced thinking, decision making, learning. It's where we process speech. So that's why sometimes when the top part of the brain goes offline, like we're not really listening and processing if someone's trying to reason with us and tell us, oh, how can I help you? And then we have our lower brain, which is our autonomic nervous system, is in charge of this. So it shifts us between like fight or flight to protect the body from harm or fear. And it supports automatic functions like breathing, heart rate, digestion, all of that. So what happens during a meltdown is this red part of the brain. Can you see my cursor? I was like wanting to like move my cursor around.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So, actually, this part should be up here. These dots got a little bit out of order, but the top part of the brain up here is where the green dot is, and then down here is like where the red dot is. But essentially, what happens during a meltdown is this red part of the brain activates at the bottom. And when it activates, it shuts down all communications to the top part of the brain. So there's like a roadblock. So now we're not able to make decisions. So we're asking them questions during a meltdown. It's shut down. The message is not being received. They're not able to problem solve. How do I get through this? They're not able to process language, what we're saying. It's just creating more stress for them because they're in survival mode. So, and when this part of the brain's activated, our nervous system usually shifts to a fight or flight response, which is our heart rate increases, where our respiration rate increases, our body gets hot, we get sweaty, and then we start to perceive like this panic, like something's wrong, right? Like this big emotion sparked a huge lower brain activation, and now we're starting to feel like I'm not safe, and that's why we get this big meltdown and of emotions. So, what you can do, and this, I'm just going to start with like the basics, and then we're going to chip down into more of the detail of it, is during a meltdown, what you can do is first try to see what triggered your child, right? So either removing them from the environment or modifying the environment. So like an example of this would be, oh, this is like a really personal example is when we were at a restaurant. I was visiting my sister. We were at a restaurant and I could tell that my daughter was kind of getting, she was getting a little overwhelmed, and she gets overwhelmed by like, uh, conflicting sounds. So like when you're in an echoey room where there's a lot going on, and she was younger during this too, so it's already a lot to process because their brains are so, still developing and everything, and sensory processing is really developing. She was overwhelmed by the sound and she started to kind of lose it. So at first I like shut down and I was like, I don't know what to do. And then, my husband just ended up taking her to the lobby for a little bit where the doors were shut, and then she was like saying hi to everyone when they were walking in, and she was able to recover from like her big emotions that she was experiencing, and she was like sitting at the table. It was hard, right? You have more postural demands, you have um, maybe food that's not familiar, and there's so many things that are different that you're not used to that you have to process. But just by removing her from the environment temporarily and bringing her back helps. So that's just one small example. Obviously you got to zoom in and zoom out to see what the trigger is. Another thing you can do is use primal cues or environment modification to help bring them back to safety. So this is through your nervous system communicating to them safety. So that could be like, and we're gonna go into detail on this on later slides, but it's all about like, is your body tense? Are your eyebrows kind of clenched down? Is there tension in your body? How your tone of voice, how fast you're talking, how slow you're talking, all of those things, people pick up on that. And especially children, they mirror that. Like they pick up on what you're doing and then they mirror and imitate that because that's how they're designed to learn. That's how our brains are designed to learn through imitation. And then just knowing what type of level of proximity your child needs in the moment. Like some children can be touched and some children can't be touched because it continues to trigger that threat response. And then knowing like, okay, can I give them eye contact or no eye contact? Because when my daughter used to have meltdowns in her room, like before bedtime, I couldn't even look at her because if I looked at her, it became more of a threat. And I was thinking probably because like she saw me looking at her and then she felt more demand put placed on her. So those are some things to consider for meltdowns. During or after the meltdown, what can be really helpful is again trying to figure out what the trigger is and seeing if there's a pattern. You want to build in proactive regulation around that trigger. So, for example, if you know that your child has meltdowns at bedtime, you want to try to front load the nervous system with regulating activities to help increase that window of regulation. So, expand their green zone, their good zone, so that they're not going to easily shift into this like red zone, this fight or flight zone. And we're going to talk about the zones and feelings and sensations that children feel in the zones and then corresponding activities in the upcoming slides. So we'll go over that too, but I just like to go over the basics first. Um, you want to normalize taking breaks when they're feeling overwhelmed. So I used to do this a lot in the clinic because a lot of the parents um, were like, oh my gosh, he just needed a break and he didn't realize that he could take a break. So if I noticed that, you know, the child was getting upset, I would just be like, oh, like we can just take a break. And then they all of a sudden were like, oh, I get a break because my brain was going like haywire, you know, or my brain was going in a loop and I couldn't focus. And so once they realize that they can take a break and then return to whatever the demand was, they usually are able um, to kind of sense that trigger and then ask for the break beforehand before it spirals. This is obviously for like getting into like, you know, two and older and when they start to understand more. Um, and then you want to designate a safe space to go to when they feel unsafe the next time. So we like have a tent that we know we can go to. And she'll go to sometimes she'll be like, I need a break, and she'll go to her tent because she's already like learned about her triggers, and she still needs some support, right? She's only 4 years old, but like that's like doing this process helps them grow those regulation skills as they get older. And then again, you want to let them know like, oh, this happens. Like, you know, mommy gets upset about things and I feel hot and I get angry and that it's not abnormal because we don't want to shut them down from working through their emotions because that's how we get this buildup of more anxiety and panic as children get older. And then I want to compare the meltdown responses to the tantrum responses because it's much different. So if your child is having a tantrum due to like a behavioral thing or whether they want something or they didn't get their way, really the only way that you should manage it is just through holding a healthy boundary. So, you know, verbalizing what you see, holding your boundaries, setting that clear limit, and then allowing them to be in control within that limit. So, you know, you can, again, I think I had an example of it was like, oh, iPad time was over. So, like, you know, we're taking the iPad away. And then you can like verbalize what you see. Like, I see that you're upset that the iPad time is over because you love iPad. Like, you really love your game. But we are going to be done with iPad. But why don't you find like a special place to put your iPad so that you know where to get it when it's time for iPad again? And maybe we can put in our schedule and we can write in a plan or plan for later, another time later in the day when you can have an iPad break or whatever. And so like that way, you're verbalizing what you see, you're holding your boundary, you're setting clear limits, and then you're allowing them to have some type of control. So, and then other examples for like responding to a tantrum again could be same as a meltdown, right? You could offer a break, you can give them options, collaborate with them, and make a plan or schedule together. Visual schedules really help with especially toddlers and younger kids because when they're younger, um, their, you know, receptive language is developing and their expressive language is developing. And a lot of speech therapists have told me, like, you know, expressive language is usually more, they have more expressive, or sorry, they have more receptive language. So they understand more than what they can say. So if you offer them visuals for them to kind of like visualize what the plan is for the day, then they're able to kind of process and they know what to expect. There's more predictability, there's more familiarity, and that helps with regulation in itself, by knowing what to expect so that they can kind of plan ahead and their brain doesn't have to work as hard in the moment to adjust or adapt. Um, so again, there's a huge difference between tantrums and meltdowns. I'm going to stay here so it doesn't get distracting because meltdowns are more sensory and you take a sensory approach and you offer more co-regulation, which I'm going to talk about in upcoming slides. But a tantrum is more like holding your boundary, setting, clear limits, and then giving them some control when you collaborate with them. Now, when they're like little and they don't have as much, their language is still developing, there's ways that you can modify it with that. So, and that's when you kind of do like the choices, like, oh, like this or this, like these are your choices, for the tantrum versus meltdown. But getting into more of like nervous system bottom up approach, which we want to do with our littles, like our toddlers and our little ones, and older 4-year-old too, because I use proactive regulation every day with my child. But when they're little and it's hard for them to understand these concepts of like collaborating and all that, and like understanding your triggers, that's going to be evolving as they grow up and develop. But proactive regulation helps the nervous system develop and regulate from like a young age. It happens like their sensory systems and nervous systems are developing from when they're born. So I have this concept called, it's kind of like the brain bank. So think about a brain, and a child who's smaller has a smaller budget for their brain. And then as they get older and develop, they might have a larger budget in their brain to tolerate changes or anything in the day, just waking up and experiencing a sensory experience like hearing the lawnmower outside or whatever that may be. But throughout the day, we have energy costs. So these are things that take money out of the brain bank. When the brain bank is empty or overdrafted, that's when we start to see like these meltdowns and these big emotions or a shorter window of regulation or flexibility. So these energy costs could be something like a new task, a change in routine, big multisensory environments like birthday parties, school, echoey rooms, or any new demands that they don't know how to execute. So those things are going to withdraw a lot of money out of our brain bank. Things that kind of boost our brain bank or deposit money back into it so that we have, our window of regulation is expanding again. Our sensory activities and breaks, movement, breath work, making accommodations for your child so the demands aren't as high. Using some of the main regulators, which we're going to talk about too, the 3 main regulators of the nervous system, excuse me, and then also kind of piecing in some mindfulness, whether that's in the morning or at night before bed. Because we don't want them to get stuck in this overdrafted brain, right? Our brain is overdrafted and we can't get back to having like, money in our brain bank, then we can't function. And then we see like chronic dysregulation, and then we see like meltdowns all the time, right? Because our window of regulation is so small because we just don't have any money left in our brain bank. Let me see. Okay. So when I talk about the brain bank and regulation, and we talk about regulation in the moment, I like to talk about it as, because I want parents to understand like, oh, we're not always trying to be like in this green zone, because we can't always be in this green zone because we might need to have our red zone activated, for us to like run around, like our heart rate has to increase so that we can like play and run around with our kids, but we need to be able to shift down and come back down to calm, like when we get back inside or something like that, for an example. So, when talking about regulation and different activities, we talk about these different zones and categorize it. One for the parents, because it's easy for us to understand if we can know what zone our child is in, right? We can know where they're at, and know where they need to be to meet that demands. And most of the time, it is in the green zone, the calm zone. But there are times where we have to lower our alertness level to go to sleep, or we have to like heighten our nervous system, so that we can be more alert for like learning or playing. So I like to show this visual just to kind of understand that it's a wave. We're going to go back and forth between these. It's natural to shift between these states throughout the day. If we were always calm and focused, then, we might not be able to activate us to do things that we need to increase our heart rate or increase our alertness level for later on. It just, when we are in this red zone for too long, it can cause us to have a lot of big emotions because it is a lot of stress on our body to be in this state for a long period of time. So this is kind of like a big part of the regulation is like identifying the trigger, identifying your feelings around the trigger. So these are like red zone feelings. You might be feeling angry or hot or wired or scared, or your body might feel tight, your brain might feel full, you might feel annoyed, your body might be busy and not be able to pay attention, or you might feel grumpy. So it's good to kind of give these visuals and actually, I'll talk about this at the end, but I do have this, all this, this is a freebie that I offer. So you can download this and print it out and use it at home too, just to kind of help your kids, showing them like visuals of how they might be feeling when they're in this red zone. So these are the things that you'll see, and you can kind of help your child see visually to point that out so they can kind of connect to that. So when your child's in this red zone and they're feeling angry and hot and wired and whatever, maybe their brain feels busy, or they can't focus because their body's running around the room and they're zooming around, they have the zoomies, then we can offer these red zone strategies. So these are things like, you could say something like, "Oh, like I see that you are feeling like your face is red, you're sweating, you're feeling hot. It looks like you might be feeling overwhelmed." So we can look at these red zone strategies and these pictures and be like, what do we want to do to help you get back down to your green zone so that we can sit down and eat dinner together as a family, if that's the example. So they can look at something like, oh, shaking a sensory bottle. Like when you're shaking, you're getting proprioceptive input. Proprioceptive input is one of the main regulators in the nervous system. We can maybe do some animal stomps together. You can do ripping and crumpling paper. And these are all going to be play-based, right? We're going to be doing it with them when they're younger. And as they get older, you can maybe offer it and they can do it on their own. But when they're little, they want to do it with you. They need that co-regulation. So you really want to join them when you're doing animal stomps. And you can say, "I'm an elephant," like stomp, stomp, like, "Are you a lion? Let me see your lion," and that way you can kind of start to bridge like the gap between like the brain and body and be like, "Oh, I was feeling like that." And when I did my animal stops, or when I used my weighted stuffed animal, or I did my candle breathing, when you blow up the candle and you go, and then the finger falls down. I used to do that with my daughter all the time. Then your body was able to cool down and feel calm, and you came back to your green zone, and you don't even have to talk about all the zones, but just talking about when you felt hot and then you did your animal stomps, it made you feel better. And that helps them kind of start to realize, like, oh, there's something that I can do about it. And I've done this with my daughter. And now sometimes when she gets overwhelmed, she starts to realize, like, I'm getting overwhelmed. She'll be like, "I think I need a drink of water to cool my body down." So with all of this work and using this, consistently, we're going to see children start to really, that light bulb turn on about like, "Oh, when I was feeling this way, I was able to do something about it." And so these are some examples for that. So this would be like, "Oh, my body was hot. I was able to take a sip of water to cool down." Um, Sorry, was someone saying something? I thought I heard someone pop on to
Yeah,
question.
there's a question.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
For you at the thing? Okay. So what was it? Oh, you know what? Maybe they just didn't list it yet, but just get the information that they'll need. Like you did include the you know,
Oh, sorry, I didn't hear the question. Hello?
I think that was probably an accident.
Oh,
But
okay.
we do have, yeah, sorry about that. There is someone who is asking, do you provide these slides to participants?
Yes, it's available. It's just I have a link and we can send it out, or you can just go to my page. I have information at the end of how to obtain this, so you can print it out and use it at home. And then I have more like resources. These are just like some general ones that are easy to do at home that you don't need a lot of tools for. But yes, I do have this available for free. So
Awesome. And then we do have another question. Do you give her the option of which option they want to do? Like when
yes.
doing the red zone strategies?
Always give an option, unless you feel like sometimes when children are really dysregulated, options are really hard, right? It's like, "Oh, I have to make a decision," and decision making is part of the top brain, right? We talked about that, like that green top part of the brain. So sometimes it could be hard, and you could even say like, you can do these things when your child in a neutral setting, when your child's not upset, right? Just to see how they feel, because once they start to feel this regulation, just in a neutral setting, they'll start to make a positive connection with it. So you could be like, oh, remember when we were playing and we did animal stomps and you really loved that? Or remember when we were doing pillow chops and squeezing pillows before bed and you loved that? Like, you want to try that, or do you want to do animal stomps? I know you love those two things. So you can kind of frame it that way and be like, oh, I noticed that you liked it one time. And then you can make that suggestion. So it just depends on your child's state of regulation. If you feel like when you ask them a question and it increases, it adds a demand on, and you see that they're more dysregulated, you could either, offer two things that you've seen and practiced with them or played with them before, or you could just start doing it and be like, that's what I do for the younger kids. I'll be like, I'm a lion. And I'll be like, roar, stomp, stomp, stomp. Or I'll be like, oh my gosh, the elephant's coming to get me. He's gonna stop and he's gonna crash me over. And then I'll like pretend to like run away so that you're like encouraging them to kind of like engage in that. When they're younger, you kind of have to really like come in and start the play-based part of it. So that's when it changes is with the age. I hope that answered the question.
And then we have Judy who is asking, do you think just providing two options from the menu would be less overwhelming than like giving them?
Yes. But it's, nice to have these visuals so they can make a choice. I would say like it's good to like just do these with kids throughout the day, right? For proactive regulation, we know that that'll be good. You can do some of these things with them. Um, yeah. And then, if they're starting to like kind of get, they're starting to get closer towards that red zone, they're going to be better off to have less options. Oh, sorry. Was there any more questions?
No, you're good.
Oh, okay, perfect. And then we have some yellow zone feelings. So the yellow zone is more of like, it's in between green and red. So we're kind of getting a little bit more, we might be feeling anxious or distracted, or I got hurt, or my body's busy, or I'm just feeling embarrassed, but it's like things start to amp up, right? We're starting to get a little goofy. We might start giggling for no reason or just giggling uncontrollably. And so we're starting to get to that area. So this is when we would be more proactive about it, right? Where we're not already in this red zone and we start to do things like, oh, we're in our yellow zone. Like I noticed that, and you don't have to say it like that. I'm just saying it to teach it. But, I'm like, oh, I'm like, the room feels really small right now. Like, why don't we push the wall to help open up the room? The kids used to love this in our gym because we had like a smaller gym. Like, oh, there's so many kids in this room because we would overlap with sessions. Let's push the wall to open up the room. And then we would count to like, be like, how many seconds should we count to? And then we would do it that way. But as you notice in this yellow zone, it's more active, right? We're doing more jumping and counting. We're doing more proactive regulation. We're moving a little bit more. They might want to be the helper. They might want to march. They might want to do some rocking side to side or humming and singing, or maybe we're reducing that input by having headphones. Maybe we're still not to the end of that yellow zone yet, and we can do some rainbow breaths, like where we're putting our arms up and then we're coming down. So it's good to catch them when they're in their yellow zone before they get to that red zone. But we know sometimes children internalize, or even adults, humans, we internalize our dysregulation, and then all of a sudden we're in red. So, but these are more movement based because when we're so high up in the red zone, we don't want to be like running around too much. Like we might stomp or do some heavy work, but we're not going to want to be doing a lot of like jumping and so much movement because it might activate the red zone even more. So it's best to do them when they're in the yellow zone. And then we have our blue zone. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Courtney, we did have a question about that. So we have someone who says, I often see these smaller things to do, and my son needs bigger things. He's a hitter. These don't meet his bigger action needs. I have so many different sensory options that don't work, like bouncing, etc. How can I regain control of him? He's out of control so often.
I mean, like, again, it's just starting to build the proactive regulation. So starting to build routines and starting to build things into your routine that's going to proactively regulate the nervous system. So for example, one thing that I started doing with my daughter, because she actually was on the opposite of like needing intense, like she needed more to understand the sensation and what it meant to her, but she was a little bit more sensitive. So she didn't need that as much intensity. She needed less intensity and more like proprioceptive input. But to answer your question, I would say just building it in. So like, maybe in the morning, like before you get ready for the day, like having like either like before you leave the room, like blowing bubbles or doing a bubble mountain before you brush your teeth. Like building those things into your routine can be helpful. Or like if he really needs intense movement, like maybe like before even getting out of bed, like it depends on your rules of the house, but like we will do like five little monkeys jumping on the bed. Again, it depends on the age, right? Everything's it's individualized, but like an example would be like five little monkeys jumping on the bed and then jumping off and crashing onto a crash pad or a pillow pad. And we do that before as a part of our routine to get out of bed. So like we're building it into the routine. Or like if there's weighted stuffed animals in the bed, it's like, oh, well, we're gonna like throw and toss our stuffed animals onto like the blanket as like, a target, a visual target before we transition to whatever we're doing next. So we're trying to build it into the routines, and that's why I work a lot with my clients individually, because it all depends on like, right, their age, the intensity of the input, um, their skills and everything like that. But essentially you just want to build it in. So if he needs intense input from the get-go, when he wakes up, trying to have a routine of play, and I guess you could put what age, maybe ask the age so that I can answer it a little bit more appropriately.
Yeah, she said that's super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
And then, more moms saying they're definitely going to print this out. And we do have another question. Oh, so the age is 4. Um,
Yeah, so like depending on like what they like for their play, like the jumping and crashing is really fun for that age. They love like jumping and crashing games, and any type of like tossing. When you add in like heavy work where you're like tossing and there's a goal, it's goal oriented. This is like all the stuff I talk about in my sensory seeker guide who need intense input. Is when you add in like a visual component of like throwing and tossing onto a target or their structure or there's a goal that helps them organize this sensation a little bit better so that they can be satisfied with that. So like if you feel like they need so much input all the time, it's because they're getting the input, but they're not able to organize the sensory information. So that's why you attach a goal, a purpose to it, so that can become more organizing and it can be satisfied in their brain and they won't feel like they need it all the time.
and then we do have another question from Nicole. How do you handle biting out of frustration? It does seem to only happen with me and less with my husband.
Yeah, so it probably only happens with a parent because like there's that, if my parent feels safe to me and I feel like, I know that I can, utilize them essentially as a sensory tool. Like they're not really thinking about this, but that's like how I would like kind of observe that to be. And how I handle biting. There was you know, one time where my daughter explored that once with us. And then what I did is I was like, ow, like, that hurt me. And I see that your mouth needs something. Like, you need something in your mouth and you're looking for something to help your body feel good, right? I'm trying to make that connection of like, I see that you need something and you tried something, but that wasn't the right way to get what you need. Let me help you find ways to give your body what it needs. And so one thing I did is I introduced like a chewy, and I was like, if you like need your chewy, you can always use your chewy. Again, I'm always providing this proactive regulation around this, but I'd be like, oh, or you could ask for a crunchy or chewy snack, or you can take a sip out of your water bottle, because she has like this resistive straw where she can bite down and suck on it to get the water out, and I have a whole freebie on oral sensory activities that you can plug into that. But I tried to help her understand like that wasn't the right way to meet your body to make it feel good, but let's figure out what does. So that's kind of how I would navigate that and in a more concise way to explain it.
Thank you. Yeah, those seem to be the questions so far. But yeah, someone else also said, Kimberly, that her 2-year-old bites and hits as well out of frustration. So
Yeah. So once you start to connect that like sensory piece of it of like, oh, like I can't bite, but biting feels good, but there are other ways to meet that need because I'm exploring what feels good to their body to help regulate. And once they know that it's like, that's not a safe way to do it. And I like to use those basic words with kids like I use it with my daughter saying, that's not safe. And she'll be like, oh, that's not safe. So I have to find a different way. And then they start to learn that pattern of like, okay,
Hi,
like
boy.
boundary. Um, did I answer all of those?
yes.
Okay, perfect. So then we have, our blue zone, which is kind of like the opposite. So when we're in our blue state or a blue zone, we're more like lethargic or sad or tired or sick. We feel lonely, shy, sluggish, bored. And usually it's like the shutdown, like frozen state. That's why it's like blue. It's like, oh, I feel frozen. I feel nervous. I can't move. I feel lonely. I don't want to engage. I feel like I need something to alert myself. So what we can do for blue zone is things like clapping and singing or stretching our body. We want to like, so when we're frozen, we want to activate a little bit more. We want to do a little bit more movement. We could do some building and crashing, play some music, do Simon Says, any of those like executive functioning skills. So like Simon Says, we have to follow like the directions, but it's playful. So that can kind of help activate that top part of the brain and turn that part back online so that we can start to kind of like defrost when we're frozen and start to get a little bit more, active and moving. And we could ask for a hug for connection. We can play I Spy, another executive functioning game to help keep that top part of the brain online so that we're not shutting down and we're not feeling like, blue zone in adults is like depressed, right? But obviously with kids, um, it's like, it's different. We see it differently with them. So again, talking about proactive regulation, these are the three sensory systems that are responsible for regulating the nervous system most. So when we give tactile input, which is touch, proprioceptive input, which is deep pressure to the body, or any type of sensation, pulling, lifting, pushing that's in the joints, tendons, muscles, that's proprioceptive input, or also known as heavy work. And then we have vestibular, which is movement. So these sensations and these sensory experiences, when given in a purposeful, meaningful way throughout the day, built into your routines, or if you have time to like, play with your child for a little bit, set a timer for like 5 or 10 minutes and do something where they're going to experience that sensation while connecting with you, can make a huge difference to proactively regulate the nervous system so that the window of regulation can be wide and we can have more flexibility and manage our emotions better and our body better. Because when we have good roots, we have good leaves. So our attention's better, our behavior's better. We're able to self-regulate, socialize, connect, engage, learn. Um, Again, this is just some, I like to talk about co-regulation. I kind of jumped from like proactive regulation to co-regulation, but I wanted to talk about this. I think is really important because I've had to do a lot of reflection on myself to learn about myself, how I can communicate safety to my child or whoever I'm engaging with, essentially. So there are so many things that our primal nervous system picks up on. So like our facial cues, our lip positioning, are we frowning? Are we smiling? Is it just a natural smile? Our eyebrow positioning, are we like this? Are we up like this? Or are we just relaxed? Are we our eye gaze? Are we shifting our eye gaze, not paying attention, feeling disconnected? Our paralinguistics. So like our is our tone different? Is our inflection different? Our pitch, how we speak. So like, when I start to kind of like whisper and come down, some kids will be like, when I've done like groups, like, oh, like, and then they're like, okay, like everyone's calm. So like how you communicate that is important. And then your body language is super important, which I feel like everyone needs to check in all the time with that when we're working with our kids or just, going about our day with our children is when we're flexed in a position like this, think about like a bear in the woods and it feels like threatened, like we're flexed like this. And so when we are flexed like this, our brain picks up like, oh, you're tense, you're tight. And you might even do that when you're like looking or talking to your friends, like, oh, you look stressed because like we're flexed and we're contracted. So making sure like our body language is calm so that the child feels like they're able to like approach and feel safe, um, you know, in this like space of like nervous system and nervous system in a room. Touch is important too, like affection, touch, um, being close or far away, knowing like, okay, my child needs some space when they're like this, or oh, my child's like this, they need me closer, and playing around with that. I had to play around with that a lot with my daughter. I used to sit like at the outside of the door when she would have meltdowns, making sure that she was safe and not giving eye contact until she started to look over and see that I was just calm in the corner. But again, it's a lot, it's individualized. So it's really kind of like taking those considerations and starting to play around with it and see how your child um, responds. And then again, like your speed, your pace, how fast you talk. If you're talking really fast, and may start to activate that red zone because they're picking up on, a high arousal state. Are you pausing? Are you allowing your child to process what you're saying? And then again, attention. So like, are you multitasking? Are you present? Are you able to like give them the attention that they need in that moment? And I've kind of already talked about this before, but like reflection and planning. So like again, you want to do like these sensory activities in a neutral setting or time, or talk about their dysregulation in a neutral setting or time, because when the meltdown's happening is not the time to do it. All we can do in that time is these co-regulation things, right? We can do these things to help calm them and make them feel safe so that we can turn that top part of the brain back online. We can, turn that green part of the brain back online and shut down that overactive red zone of the brain. So again, using your safety cues to help them reach that safe space. And then later on, when you're reflecting with them, you can say things to them. And especially when they're younger, obviously you're going to use more simple language or more like gestures or whatnot, and say, this is an example right here. So identifying the trigger together. Oh, mommy was giving the baby a lot of attention. And you can ask them their experience with the trigger. So this is when their communication, as they get older. Like, how did that make you feel when mommy was not paying attention to you? And so then you want to link their feelings to the outcomes. So you could like paraphrase this or like say this to them to model it. You were feeling left out, so you hit mommy, and you're trying to help them connect the dots. Like, yeah, I was feeling left out. So that like next time you could say, oh, like, why don't we do something together? Because a huge thing with co-regulation is like the sense of togetherness. And then you want to summarize it for them. So like when you're feeling like this, you can say, mommy, can I play with you and the baby? Because we want to be together. And then you want to model your own like experiences throughout the day. So sometimes I'll be like overwhelmed with all the tasks I have to do, and I'll say out loud so my daughter could hear it. I'll be like, oh my gosh, like my brain is so busy right now. And you just asked me a question and I didn't even hear it. I'm so sorry. Like my brain's busy and I just need a second to take a break so that I can, help you with whatever you need. And then usually we'll take a break together, whether we're just like having like, oh, like let's get some water, or like let's get a snack. And then, we can both return to regulation together, because co-regulation is about a sense of togetherness. So that's my, concise version of all of these things. There's a lot of, there's so many different things to take into consideration when it comes to like regulation and emotions. Um, but that's my shortened version of it. Any questions? Oh, if you would like, I do have like a digital guide that you can dive deeper into, and I'm offering 20% off with the code AuggieOT20. It's in my Stan store. On my through my Instagram page. And then you can also sign up for free emails to get access to the freebies, which is that zone, the wave of regulation with the red, yellow, and blue zone. It also has green zone on how to maintain green zone. I just didn't include it because it was a little too much for the presentation, but I do have that freebie. If you sign up for emails for free, you'll get the PDF downloadable version for you to use in your home if you want to print it out, or you can send it in for school if you feel like your child's struggling with school, with regulation at school. And this is where you can find me. This is my social handle. I have a website, and then I have an email if you want to send me any questions that you have to my email. Um, I'm happy to reply and support you in whatever way I can. Sometimes if there's a lot going on, then we'll, do a call, or we might do some like I do like voice note coaching on my Instagram as well too, which is kind of nice in the moment. People can voice note and I can help guide them through it as well. So yeah, that's it. Thank you for listening. Is there any questions or anything remaining? Let's see if I can get the chat pulled up.
Of thank yous. Yeah, thank you, Courtney. It was also definitely very helpful for me. I have a 2.5-year-old and we've been experiencing tantrums too. So
Yes.
it's
It's a lot. It's a lot. I know like there was a lot in the presentation, but I like to just plant the seed of all those things, because when those things start to make sense, you're like, oh, and then things you start to connect the dots and start to realize all of these things, and then then you're able to kind of like make a plan yourself that works best for you based on those general concepts of like regulation and how the brain works.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so we have, yeah, so someone is asking, are you emailing the slides? I want to print out the anger things. And so they are available on your website. Is that correct?
Yeah. Judy just commented in the chat saying with the link, because the freebies are available immediately. So like you don't have to go back to your email to download them. Like as soon as you put in your email, then it populates for you and you can click on. I have like, I don't even know, like maybe 10 resources, but the top one is the regulation wave, and that's the one that I showed in this presentation. So, yeah, so that's where it's available. And then when you subscribe to the emails, which is free, I send out like emails like once or twice a week with like either freebies or like just free tips and stuff. And then if people want to, feel like they need more, then they can either like work with me or like use one of my other resources that's like more in depth, or like some um any of my courses or whatever, they feel that they need.
Awesome. And then we also have, so can the recording be sent to us? I believe there's a follow-up email after the event from Auggie, but if not, there's the link will be available through the Auggie app if you would like to watch the recording.
Yeah, thank you for recording that. I'll probably share that with people in my email too, so that they can see that as well.
Could I ask a question, or is it too late?
You can ask a question.
Ah, how, and I'm sorry if you've covered this already, but when you're trying to identify the difference between what the activity you're going to do with them to calm them down, whether or not that activity is going to help them regulate and calm down, or actually get more aroused, more hyped up, is that like quite an individual basis, or are there sort of standard go-to things that you could
Yes.
apply?
So the one thing that we say as OTs is when in doubt, probe it out, which means when you're in doubt, proprioceptive input will always help to calm the nervous system. It could also be alerting depending on how you do it. But like heavy work, proprioceptive input, I have a whole freebie. It's like a 10-page heavy work freebie in my freebies too. And those things can help calm down the nervous system always. Vestibular input, touch, those can be iffy depending on your child's sensory profile. And every person, every child has a different sensory profile, meaning that they respond differently and they have a different threshold for what that sensation, how much that sensation they need throughout the day to like be at a regulated state. I also have another freebie on how to figure out your child's sensory profile. It's a checklist too. So it is all individual, but yes, proprioceptive input is my go-to, and that's what I would say. In that instance, when in doubt, use proprioceptive input for calming. But again, you want to just kind of proactively build it in throughout the day through their play, through regulation play. I have like a resource. It's regulation play cards. There's like 120 something sensory activity cards where like you can kind of like try them out with your child, or you can just introduce it and then your child starts to engage in this regulation play, and then they start to, it also helps with play skills. A lot of kids who struggle with ideation and like coming up with ideas for play, it can be helpful with that too, because you're like activating these different sensory systems in the brain. It helps keep that top part of the brain online to come up with new ideas, and then you'll just see them start to kind of independently play with these types of things too, so that you're not always like having to like be the regulator. That can be a lot for a parent.
That's great, thank you.
We have a question from Katie. How can I help my child with leaving a place, like leaving the playground? My 2-year-old has a hard time with leaving from one place to go to the next. She might sit, cry, and refuse to leave.
Yes, that is so hard. So what I used to do is I used to make it a routine, like with the playground, a couple things. And this is just like through my personal experience. I've also created other, plans with other parents depending on their situation or like their child's specific sensory profile. But I knew that oral input, and I know that oral input in general is very regulating to the nervous system. So I would always bring like one or two snacks for her to choose from so that she had a choice. And I'd be like, okay, like, when the park's done, um, it's all done. Or I would give, warnings, like we would have a timer so she could finish her idea, right? That's the first thing. They have ideas and sometimes they need to finish and execute their ideas. So I would give a timer for her to be done. I'd be like, okay, 2 minutes. And when it's done, I would go and show her and she would have to like press the button to turn it off. And then I would say, okay, like now we get our snack. And she knew that every time like we would either go in the wagon or walk back, she would get like her snack, whether it was like a crunchy or a chewy snack, because oral input is really regulating to the nervous system. I mean, think about it, as babies, we suck our thumbs to put things in our mouths as babies to help organize our nervous system, to help soothe us. So I use that as like a strategy. And I did it with the car too. I'd be like, oh, like on our way to school, like you get to pick, like, you get to have your smoothie or something, whatever, that could be, or I would do like a game to leave too. There's like so many different options. You could be like, okay, like we would either do a racing game, or I would start playing with her at the park as like an idea. Maybe we play like we would be playing zoo, and like she would be the lion and I would be the elephant. And then I would be like, I would, as a part of our play, transition us from the playground to, walking back home or walking to the car, and make that more play based. So the transition's more play based. It's not more like, oh, we're done, everything's all done, the fun's done. It's like, well, we can kind of have like a play based transition. Once you start implementing these things, you'll start to learn that there's ways to like transition and still have fun and still have this positive outlook on the transition away. So it's individual for each child, but that's kind of like my like concept on it, if that makes sense. So because they have to have like a purpose or like a reason to do something, like, well, why? I don't want to get out of the car. Like, why? Like, there's got to be like play, sensory, something to help transition them. Or, I've used visual schedules before too, where like they know what's coming next. So like we'll do the visual schedule in the morning for the morning. And then she's like, oh, I know that we're already doing that. I know when we leave the park, we're going somewhere else to do something else. And there's something kind of planned in there that I know that she likes, so that she's like, oh yeah, like, well, we're done with the park and I can go on to the next thing. But it's like when they're so engulfed in like the park is so regulating, right? We're climbing, we're sliding, it's so sensory. We're outside, we're getting that natural, like humans are meant to be outside, right? We're getting that natural calming. So why would I want to leave the park? There's got to be something else to transition them. I hope that helps answer your question. Okay, good. I'm glad.
So we have 5 more minutes left. If anyone has like a final question that they'd like to ask, or anything they'd like to share.
Yeah, I hope this was helpful. There's a lot of information, so I apologize if it was too much. But I am not concise, and I'm working on that because I'm like, let me give you all of the information. So many different like freebies and different things. It can be overwhelming to know where to start, which is why people usually will be like, I booked a call because I didn't know where to start. Like, I don't know what to do, but you can start to slowly, like, read the stuff, implement it, see how your child responds. It's essentially how you do it, because every child is different, right? So it's like you can't just do a plug and chug for everyone. Like, you can have these activities and you can have these concepts organized in your head, and then help your child understand what that means to them, right? With the different zones. You might create your own red zone activities, and you might create your own yellow zone and blue zone activities, because you've discovered them through exploration of this with your child together. So that's why I like to share a lot on my page on my Instagram, because I feel like when people see it in the home and they see like it happening in real time, like, oh, that's how I can do it. And then it ends up becoming their own thing and not my thing, but it has to start somewhere. I'm reading this comment. Can dig in if you stumble upon them. Didn't know how to use them. Oh, perfect. I'm so glad, Judy. Thank you for the feedback. I like the feedback. It's helpful, whether it's good or bad.
Awesome. Well, if there are no more questions, we'll just wrap up. And again, thank you so much, Courtney, for your presentation and for all the incredible tools and information. I, again, personally, I know that I'm going to take a lot of what you shared today and try to implement it with my daughter. So, and like Judy said, I think we all feel the same way. So thank you again so much. And thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. And yeah, again, you can find the recording later on the Auggie app. And then you have Courtney's information as well. But yeah, I hope you all have a great rest of your day.